Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Construct Innovate webinar series on modern methods of construction. My name is Jaimie Goggins, and I'm co-director of Construct Innovate, which is Ireland's National Research Centre for Construction Technology and Innovation. This is an 8-part webinar series. Happy Chinese Day and happy Pancake Tuesday to everyone there. So hopefully people have different reasons for celebrating today. But today we're going to focus on platform design and playbooks, which are key in scaling MMC. As I said, this is part of an 8-part webinar series. We're on week 6 now, with 2 more weeks to go. Really fortunate today to have 3 fantastic speakers with a lot of experience in this area. So we have Paul Taylor, who's a principal consultant in industrialized construction at Mott MacDonald. And he's going to talk about platform design and playbooks key in scaling MMC. And Paul is also co-author of the product platform rulebook in the UK, which he'll talk about and some other things later on. Then we have Jaimie Johnson, who's director of Bryden Wood and is head of global systems there. And he's going to talk about platforms and practice. And Jaimie and Bryden Woods have been pioneering and developing and promoting delivery platforms for construction in the UK and worldwide. And they released a book, it must be about 10 years ago, I think he'd correct me if I'm wrong, on delivering platform for government assets there. So it's not just this new thing that we're talking about. It's been around for a while, but there's been evolutions of that. So he's going to take us through platforms and practice and how they actually work. And then we have Jack Fitzgerald, who's sustainability projects at Lidl, and he's going to talk about Lidl Zero Building in Maynooth in there as a case study project. So really looking forward to the 3 presentations. So we'll have our 3 presenters first, followed by the Q&A session at the very end. These webinars are being recorded and be available on the Construct Innovate YouTube channel afterwards. Except the Q&A is not published afterwards. If you have any questions for any of our 3 speakers, please do post them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And as I said, we'll deal with all the questions at the end after all 3 presentations in there. So with that, I'm going to start off and invite Paul to make the first presentation. So Paul Taylor, Principal Consultant in Industrialised Construction at Mott MacDonald, who's going to talk to us about platform design and playbooks, which are key in scaling modern methods of construction. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Jaimie. So hopefully you can see my screen there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity as well. Yeah. So I'm gonna like you said, Jaimie, talk about platform design and playbooks and its effect on MMC as well. So just to go through a bit of a content of what I'm going to go through, I'm going to introduce myself and talk about my experience a little bit, and then going to take it back to basics with platforms and talk about what they are and then how we implement them. One of the things that I've been part of is the product platform rulebook. So I'd like to put that propose it as a playbook and tell you through the guidance of it. And then I'm going to talk about how platforms can scale MMC. And I think what we need to talk about there is what actually makes MMC a successful delivery method in the first place. And then how can platforms scale this successful delivery. And then I've got a quick case study. One of the things that we're doing at Mott MacDonald is Hospital 2.0. So trying to deploy a platform when it comes to healthcare and hospitals. So I want to talk about that a little bit in the context of rulebook as well, if that's okay. So just to tell you about myself a little bit and how I've ended up in this seat right now. So I actually started my career in aerospace in Rolls-Royce, working on the gas turbine supply chain. We developed quite an appreciation for the benefits of repetition and its effect with continuous improvements when it comes to delivery the same thing over and over again. After Rolls-Royce, I joined the Manufacturing Technology Centre, which worked in other industries, and that was including construction as well. Where I worked on a project called the Construction Innovation Hub, actually with Jaimie as well, Jaimie Johnson, where we developed something called the Product Platform Rulebook. I then moved over to Mott MacDonald, where what I've been doing with Mott MacDonald is applying these rules and this guidance in anger on different projects and different programs. So it'd be really good to take you through all that. Before we sort of start though, what I want to do is just introduce some key terms that are really important to me and the work that I do in trying to baseline terminology when it comes to product platforms. So I've taken this information from PAS 8700 as well. So the big sort of key term that I do as an industrialized construction consultant, I try and explain industrialized construction as the removal of unwanted variability. And that ties in with product platforms, because when I think about product platform, I'll show you this in the next slide as well, I think about balancing repeatability with variability. So you want variability for your projects, but you want to maximize that repeatability because you get that continuous improvement, the economies of repetition, the economies of scale in that. Offsite, creative things away from their final location, and MMC in general, methods to improve productivity and quality. So those definitions are really important to me as I talk about these terms. So what about a product platform? So when I think about that, I think about product platforms being an integrated approach to repeatability and variability across multiple projects. And that word product in this context is just something that is specified, designed, or made for single or multiple customers or clients. So I always think about the seesaw when I think about platforms and that balance of repeatability and variability. You want to maximize the repeatability across your program and projects because that's where you'll get your benefit and your efficiencies from. Does it just have to be components? No, it doesn't. When it comes to product platforms, components are an important part with like kits of parts. But also what's really important is standardized repeatable processes that you can follow. When we talk about MMC, we talk about factory lines as well, and the processes in factory lines, having them repeatable is really important. And people and relationships is a really, really big part of it as well. So strategic relationships across our client bases and supply chains are so important to maximize that repeatability as well. So when I was in the Construction Innovation Hub, thinking about product platforms with Jaimie and everybody else, we started seeing them all around us, basically. So I just wanted to just bring it back to what platforms we have around us. The simplest one, which is a bit a light-hearted one, is a sandwich itself. So when you think about a sandwich, you've got this system, which is type of bread and then a filling in between that type of filling. You've got repeatable elements there and variable elements. So the variable elements with a sandwich is the different types of bread you can have and the actual different types of filling you can have at the same time. So that is in effect the product platform. And let's bring it back to sort of built environments as well. We've got Seismic, which is a project that the MCC worked on, and it was a company called Algeco that worked on that, and Jaimie was involved in that as well. In the seismic modules, as a volumetric module, you've got repeatable elements like the seismic connector and repeatable spans that can vary in size as well. And you can have variable finishes. So you've got this sort of like repeatable base, but then you can have variable spans. The number of modules can be variable, or the finish of modules can be variable. So that is like a product platform in itself. Even your Visit Kitchen product platform. So actually the space claim unit, so 600 millimeter standard width, and you have lots of different companies with appliances that can fit into that standard base. You can have different finishes, you can have different cabinet types. So that in itself is a product platform. And then you have more technical product platforms as well. So I've got Ocado's smart platform on here. So you've got quite repeatable elements there. So you obviously have a big factory. The factory layout, the automated pickers, location of picked items, scalable software solutions is all repeatable. But variable is the actual where this factory could be, what picked items that they could actually pick, what customers there are, and then logistic strategies for having those picked items delivered to customers and clients. They are all types of platforms because what they're trying to do is balance repeatability with variability for the client or for the customer. So where does the product platform rulebook come into product platforms? So the product platform rulebook, obviously it's called a rulebook, but there's a lot of guidance in there as well. So it provides rules and guidance on the development of platforms. And I'm going to shelve the rules for this 15-minute presentation and talk about the guidance actually. When you talk about the rulebook, there are 3 key domains: demand, develop, deploy, all very, very important when it comes to the development of platforms. So demand is looking at aggregating demand across a number of projects. Develop, assessing what elements should be repeatable and what should be variable, and deploying, which is really, really important, is that you've built all this programmatic information, all these repeatable elements. How do you use them in anger on projects? And that's the deploy part of it. So when it comes to demand, it's about working very closely with clients to think about what their pipeline looks like. And once you have a good feel of that pipeline, how do you actually change it in a way that you can look at the commonality between that pipeline? So we're talking about like harmonize, digitize, and rationalize. So harmonizing, articulating requirements in existing formats, digitize, structure, and publish and get using standard templates, and then rationalize, identifying where they can be grouped. This is really key because then you can look at a program of works and think about what can be repeatable across that demand. When it comes to developing the strategy, to define the product outcomes and target, market and outline what will be repeatable across them. It's really important. And also setting up workflows and how stakeholders are going to work together, what are existing solutions that can be used, and then generating those repeatable concepts. So designing those repeatable products, but also those processes at the same time as well. And then once you have that, all that key information that you've done outside of a project environment, but in the program, you can then use that information on the projects. So configuring the built environment project to have that information. And that firstly starts by pulling that demand from the demand domain. So it is common and can be used with repeatable elements. Then obviously in that deploy section, managing interfaces between those repeatable and variable elements is really important. And then utilizing those repeatable elements so you can get the benefit of them. So moving on now to how do platforms scale MMC. So what I want to talk about is what makes MMC a successful delivery method. And then I want to talk about how platforms can actually enable that. And I think that obviously the best way to maybe do this is to talk about examples or real life examples that we have around us. So I think it's quite a good example actually from Algeco. And the reason why I quite like this example is because this started way back in 2010. So we've been trying to develop this product platform. The rule book was developed like 2021 onwards. But this example here has a lot of experience and a lot of in-use data to help with this. So in 2010, since 2010, Algeco have delivered over 220 modular restaurants in MacDonald's. So 80% of those modules are completed in Algeco's Carnaby site. It's a very successful relationship to the point where there's 200 new restaurants planned over 4 years, and Algeco has the exclusive building rights to that as well. What makes this really successful for Algeco? Well, they have that stable pipeline. They have that stable, repeatable relationship. They have repeatable elements. So when you walk into a McDonald's, you see the same building elements, the same FF&E within it. They have the same repeatable processes. And then because of that, they can undertake continuous improvements, not just in the factory, but also on site as well through lessons learned and how they can become more efficient with it. This is all the ingredients to make successful MMC a delivery method. So a repeatable product line is critical for an MMC factory line. And one of the examples from that has led to the progression of it is recently they delivered a McDonald's that was a completely off-site net zero building. So really, really good success for them. So you can see what that looks like and what that looks like as a success because they've got that stable factory line and they've got that stable pipeline, which means that from an MMC perspective, they're really set up to get a lot of benefit from it. So if that's the case, how can platforms help with that? So obviously I've been talking about platforms being a balance of repeatability and variability. And if we look at that last example, repeatability is really, really important for MMC. Repeatability in the factory line, repeatability in delivery methods. So that's how the product platform can help scale MMC. So as you look at these 3 domains that we talked about before, so if you look at the demand domain, you're really trying to stabilize your pipeline and you're looking at the development of those stable relationships with the clients and the supply chain as well. So you get a good grounding and foundation for that repeatable delivery. So when it comes to that develop section, so when you're looking at the programmatic implementation and not just projects themselves, you can look at the repeatability across them and you can develop something that suits the factory line for MMC. So development of repeatable solutions that can enable the successful use of a factory line. And then we come to deploying projects as well. So deploying projects that are configured with those repeatable MMC elements in mind. So if you've done the demand domain and you've undertaken that information to understand the pipeline and you've developed a programmatic approach, when you deploy it, your factory line will already be set up for those repeatable elements and can meet what the client sort of wants. And it can be amalgamated with those variable elements that are specific project-based variable client requirements, if that makes sense. So what was the challenge and what's the challenge going forward? Well, obviously I came from an aerospace background initially, and it's really interesting to see the difference between the 2 industries, having had that experience. The built environment is really complicated, and part of the ones that's really complicated and there's real benefit of the built environment is the disparate supply chains. So when it comes to like aerospace, for instance, or automotive, you've got like a big company right in the middle of all the continuous improvement activity. With construction, you've got these disparate supply chains, which are really beneficial because it means that benefits are divided across locations, across regions. So that's really good. It does mean that you need to take things a bit differently. So you can still see sort of like the process here and the challenge around it. I think one of the things to talk about here is like what we did and what we learned in that bottom right. So in MMC and with construction tried to build factories when demand wasn't quite stabilized, mandated MMC where projects weren't quite ready, designs a bit like in bespoke, which is not helpful for MMC and killed repeatability, focused on tech, which something that's really important is at the aggregating demand and strategic partners and relationships, and chasing innovation without thinking about those soft skills and that incremental sort of change. You get to the point where realization is that you see what those gaps are, see where the differences are, and you can start thinking about how you improve that going forward. So just to fit, I think this is the last slide here. So just to finish on one last example here. One of the things that we're really excited about in Mott MacDonald is the new hospitals program. So what we're looking at in the new hospitals program is how we look at hospital deployment as a programmatic approach. So the product platform here is called Hospital 2.0, and we've been working with part of the health delivery partnership with Mace and other companies, thinking about how we can actually deploy hospitals in a product platform way. So I've got the demand, the develop and deploy domains to think about how we are doing this. So from a demand section, so I've got colleagues who are working on what we call a pipeline intelligence portal, which is meant to be like an intelligent database that aggregates demand of products required for our in-scope hospital projects. So it sounds like a very simple, easy activity, but actually when we think about the sort of our trusts across the country, our different schemes, and the way they've been set out. Nomenclature and naming is completely different. And even that can be quite a challenge to even just stabilize and harmonize and the requirements when it comes to naming conventions and requirements. That's been quite a task. But that's going to be really helpful when we come to actually developing and deploying hospitals. When it comes to the development part of this, we've been looking at standard departments and clusters, so standard inpatient floor plates, standard maternity floor plates, and all self-contained as well. So what that means is that you can not just enable repeatability from the architectural elements, but the likes of building services like MEP, for instance, if they are self-contained, you can actually repeat those MEP patterns at the same time as well. And once you've got that repeatability in there, you can start thinking about offsite delivery because you have those repeated factory lines. And that's something that's really important because the one of the real challenges here is uptake from the supply chain. So if we can develop buildable offsite solutions for these hospitals, that'll be really beneficial for us. And the last one here is deploy. So it's really, really important again. So use of specifications and design guardians to enable uptake of standard departments for hospital schemes. The way we're set up in England is that we have the central NHS, but then we have our trusts and schemes that have all accountability on them. So what we need to do is make sure that they are uptaking our specifications from that we've developed in that develop stage. And we have design guardians that are helping and coaching to use that at the same time as well. So this is almost like an example of how we are trying to deploy and develop product platforms in anger on a very complicated project, actually. But it's something that is really beneficial, and we're starting to see a lot of benefit from it at the same time as well. Okay, I think that is me there. Thank you very much, Jaimie. I think I've overrun a little bit. Sorry about that.
No.
But yeah, all good. Thank you.
Perfect, Paul. That's great presentation. In there, lots to chew over there. Please, if anyone has any questions for Paul, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But that strong message about balancing that repeatability with variability. So basically, maximizing repeatability and then removing any unwanted variability, but not removing variability, but just only unwanted variability there. That project platform rulebook, we use it quite a bit just in terms of kind of showcasing how it can work. But that as a guidance document and rules for people that are looking to set up platforms is really good, and I'm sure people have questions on that. Interested on the Mott MacDonald, or sorry, the McDonald's restaurants and that, that again, pipeline and repeatability are the key there in there. But I was just thinking about it. I remember in 1998 when McDonald's came to Castlebar here in Mayo in the west of Ireland, and we heard that this new restaurant, McDonald's, are coming to the west, and it's coming on the back of a truck, and it'll be all ready and put together in a couple of days and open, nothing on the site and open. And we went over to watch it coming on the trucks and being put together in a day. It was so that's nearly 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So you imagine that pipeline worldwide and that repeatability and what they've got to at this stage because they, in there. So, and getting to that offsite net zero, is definitely achievable for a company like that.
I think one of the things there as well, Jaimie, is that I didn't mention it in the slide that the incremental gains and the incremental efficiency gains means that, as compared to a traditional build, they're 50% faster for getting these restaurants in operation from concept to operation is 50% quicker than traditional because of those incremental gains.
Yes, and they've got them over time in their lessons each time. Okay, so we're going to move on to our second presenter, Jaimie Johnson, who's head of global systems at Bryden Wood, and he's going to speak to us again about platforms in practice. As I said, Jaimie and Bryden Wood have been pioneering in this area, developing and promoting these digital platforms for construction in there, and I think at this definitely more than 10 years in there. So, very looking forward to this. Jaimie, over to you with your presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Jaimie. You can see my slides all right, can you?
Yep.
That's the first check. Good stuff. Okay. So yeah, I've got a few slides on theory. Hopefully it will reiterate what Paul said and add some colour to it. And then I'm going to show you a practical example and what this means, what the outcome is. So as Jaimie says, we actually started this concept 2017. We were working for the Ministry of Justice on the new prisons program. One of the things we were developing was industrialised solutions for things like house blocks. But we said to MOJ, you've also got education and healthcare and offices and visits and sports and dining and all these other facilities in your estate. If you develop solutions that are any good, they're not just good for the MOJ. You should make them more broadly across government. So we started this idea, this concept of looking across sectors and trying to find common solutions. That kind of started the conversation that as if you sort of look through all these documents, there's the kind of thinking evolved over time. You can see on the right-hand side the documents that Paul was involved in writing that kind of refer back to this. There's a whole suite of documentation. It got built into a lot of the government policy and strategy for a period. And so, as Jaimie says, this is not a new idea. It's something we've been working on and evolving over time. The key concept, this is a kind of different way of explaining what Paul's talked about. The key concept was rather than in the sort of traditional design world, everyone looks at why sectors are different and special. So people focus on why healthcare is so complicated, why education is its own little world of understanding. The key concept was if you flipped the telescope round and said, rather than look for why sectors are different, if you looked for commonality, you would come up with a different answer. And if you could find commonality across sectors, exactly as Paul says, understanding where there's commonality, but allowing for the variability that is specific to healthcare or education or whatever, you could potentially come up with highly repeatable elements that could be deployed at scale across multiple sectors. Now you're tackling potentially the entire government pipeline. That's how you get economies of scale. That's how you make this sort of shift into the manufacturing space. Everyone's got their favourite examples. So Paul likes the sandwich and the your kitchen cupboards. I like IKEA as an example because everyone knows it, quite intimately at this point, I think. So everyone knows that with IKEA, the fixing components, the interfaces are always the same. But as Paul says, the process, the book is always the same. The tools are always the same. You only ever need an Allen key and a screwdriver, maybe a hammer. So everyone recognises there's a complete sort of standardization of the components and process, but just because they vary the length of the shelves or the units or the finishes, you get exactly this thing of complete standardization at interface and process and quite a lot of variability. And it's done for furniture making, what we're trying to do, construction. Furniture making used to be highly skilled, labor intensive, very expensive. Now everyone can make furniture. Like, what's that for construction? And could we tackle things like the skills gap by simplifying construction? Could we diversify our labor pool? Could we tackle lots of these other endemic problems in construction through making simplified, easy to install interfaces, those sorts of things? So this is how we describe it. We say if you had a coordinated set of components and interfaces and processes, on the right-hand side, you could codify those quite easily as a digital library with configuration rules. Design teams could be configuring projects, so not designing a school from scratch each time, but configuring standardized solutions around classrooms and corridors or Hospital 2.0 wards, inpatient things, as Paul's talked about. So you think of design as a configuration of standardized components with then, the project specifics on top. And on the left-hand side, you think about manufacture of standardized components assembled in a particular way, exactly as IKEA's done. And that opens the doors to economies of scale, but also potentially automation in design and in assembly, which I'll talk about a bit later. So this is why you do it. You do exactly what manufacturing's done, incremental gains, as Paul's talked about. You get a component, you optimize it, and you make it more and more efficient. You get economies of scale by doing it again and again. You get processes that continually improve. So whereas construction currently deals in, we talk about constant reinvention, manufacturing is continual improvement. That's where we want to get. That's how you get those incremental gains, and that's how you start getting into those 40, 50, 60% improvements in time and delivery, etc. So we've been working on this for a long time. We've now developed a kit of parts, but not just the components, also the tools and the workflows and the ways of putting these things together. And we would use exactly the same components across all of these sectors. So again, by looking for commonality, what we found is there's much more typological similarity between education, resi, healthcare, etc., than people have traditionally thought. So we've been developing solutions which are good for all of these sectors. Where I'm going to show you an office deployment, you can imagine this deployed across the government estate, or certainly on large portions of the government estate. When Paul and I were working at the hub together, we did a piece of work looking across the government estate. We found that about 70% of the things that government builds could be delivered with the same kit of parts. So the potential scale of deployment is vast. This maybe explains that principle. So if you imagine the interfaces like IKEA between the columns and the beams in this instance are the same each time, you can imagine to an operative on site and to a manufacturer of the components, you're just making the same thing. You're carrying out the same process time and time and time again. Just by cutting the beam to a different length and cutting the column to a different length, suddenly you get the same kit of parts deployed to multiple different sectors. And then the variability becomes the facade that you bolt on or the MEP equipment that you put in place. So one of the things we found through the government analysis work was that story heights were about a person height plus a bit. At that sort of height, you can get natural light about 8 meters into a building. That's why classrooms and hospital wards and apartments are about 8 meters deep. So that typology of 8 meter deep space, central corridor, 8 meters deep space is incredibly sectors. So if you start to develop solutions that did that very well, suddenly it's really easy to imagine how just by tweaking some of the components that go into it, you can start building completely different sectors. What that then gets you into is once you have standard components and you're looking at massive repeatability, now you can start to automate their manufacture. So this was taking one of the sets of components we developed because we were delivering lots of them. We could use robots to make them. So for some components, we didn't even draw them. The file goes straight from our desktops to a robot that makes the components. They are then millimeter, sub-millimeter perfect. And suddenly you're not talking about construction tolerances, you're talking about manufacturing tolerances, and that opens up all sorts of benefits. So as we know, lots and lots of work on site is correcting tolerance issues or the issues left by the previous trade. This was a prototype, but this is how we built the project I'm going to show you. This was looking at delivering one of these superstructure systems. So things to note, we're measuring things in minutes. Every task here is incredibly straightforward. Like if you watch this video several times, you could put this superstructure together. It's all incredibly simple. We only ever have a couple of operatives, 3 or 4 operatives on site. And this was looking at whether you could make an entire superstructure while never working at height. So you stand on the floor plate, you make the floor above you, you then, when that's ready, go and stand on that floor plate, make the floor above. But you can see here we're using a handful of operatives, a little bit of automation, and delivering, in this instance, an incredibly accurate superstructure. So on 9-meter structural bays, we were plus or minus 5 millimeters because everything was laser cut. You'll see in a second, all of the MEP fixing points were cast into the slab. So now you have, like a car chassis, you have this incredibly accurate superstructure that's ready to receive everything else as a kit of parts. So this is how we delivered this project. This is a building called The Forge. It's for Landsec, who are the UK's largest private developer. So one thing to note, this is incredibly site-specific. All of the step-ins, all of the way the building is shaped is designed to absolutely maximise the volume that you can fit within the planning envelope in London. So again, absolute variability, as Paul's talked about, absolute standardisation at component level. So we've designed a very, very site-specific solution that uses a kit of parts that was originally developed actually for the prisons programme and then proven to be relevant for schools and in this instance using a commercial office. So these are some key stats, about 139,000 square metres. This is our most award-winning project, so architecturally award-winning, but also in terms of innovation and carbon and a bunch of other things. We were lucky enough to have a team from the University of Cambridge who had complete access to all of the site records, all of the site eye reports, everything on site, and they could carry out, they were looking at productivity benefits to see what platforms did in terms of solving the productivity crisis that everyone knows construction's had. So we had some incredible stats. I can't go through them all, but there's a link to a document if you want to read the full report. There's a very good case study explaining exactly how platforms address productivity. But one of the things we found, because of that idea that we could take the components and super optimize them and remove carbon and make them a lot leaner, we got about 40% reduction in embodied carbon, which obviously, again, all of these stats, if you multiplied it by the application of platforms, are massive. This was actually the first net zero commercial development in the UK. Has Neighbours UK 5-star rating, which is a international rating system. But you can see we talk about chain reactions of benefit. So because we had a super optimized superstructure, the building weight comes down. We have fewer transport movements. We had virtually no wastage on site because everything's a kit of parts that comes together. There's no sort of cutting and shaping things on site. So we get multiple benefits through doing this, the scale of which is quite significant. One of the key benefits was because we could really integrate all of the systems together in a way that manufacturing does. Like if you look inside your phone or under the bonnet of your car, manufacturing does a very good job of integrating things. In traditional office, you get a kind of slab zone, pipework zone, ductwork zone, cable tray zone, lighting, ceiling, finishes, and you end up with these sort of wasted spaces. So one of the benefits, we could reduce the floor-to-floor heights down to 3.5 meters while keeping the ceiling heights at sensible London ceiling heights. What it meant for Landsec was you can get 11 stories in what would be a 10-story building normally. So if you're a commercial developer, that's immediately a massive benefit. You get like an additional story and the rental income for the life of the building. So that alone has a kind of huge commercial imperative. Because of the accuracy of that superstructure, we engaged the supply chain. They told us about 40% of the cost of a facade is on-site measuring, site surveys, shimming, masticing, bracketing, like filling the gaps between the manufactured things. The facades have been industrialized for a long time, and when it hits the traditional sort of construction tolerances element, there's a massive mismatch. Just because the facade was designed to go into the superstructure and they believe the superstructure was super accurate, we took 40% of the cost out of the facade. And you can see the install rates, because it was pre-engineered to receive the facade, they installed the panels about 10 times faster than traditional construction. So theoretically, you could have clad this building in a week, but no one quite understood that at the start of the project, and so they didn't gear up for it. So we saw them, for instance, do 19 panels in an hour and a half and then go, well, we'll be back in 2 weeks because we've got to go and make some more panels. But now we know this, we can accommodate that moving forwards. Similar thing on the MEP, because the superstructure was designed to have repeatable bays. The bays had a repeatable set of fixings cast into them. Our friends NG Bailey could then set up bench tops, drop the MEP into the cassettes, stack those up in the factory, wheel them out. They would then wheel them into a truck, wheel them onto the floor plate. And on the right-hand side, you can see we had specially adapted forklifts that picked up 5, 6, 7 cassettes at a time. Fixing points already in there. There's no drilling on site. The team just locks these things off, moves on to the next one. So 2 operatives just go tearing down a floor plate, installing what would normally be endless trades and overlaps and all these sorts of things. Looks amazing, looks incredibly well coordinated. Everything was designed to be maintained and replaced, and we could put all of that sort of effort into the front end. And you can see the install time has absolutely collapsed once they got the hang of the forklift. So NG Bailey reckon they took 30,000 hours of site labour. Install times compared to industry standards absolutely collapsed. And so suddenly you get these massive productivity and speed benefits. So if you read the full report, the Cambridge data was interesting. It said because no one had done this system before, there was sort of variability, again, that word, in the kind of, the activity rates on site. They said, if you did the manufacturing thing and took out all the variability and just did like 6 bits of steel every day, without going faster than you've already gone, you would cut the program by 40%. So doing nothing differently with the same team, the same people, you could have built the building about 40% quicker. So they use these things called flow line diagrams. This is looking at the activity and saying the time it took to go from ground to first to second, second to third. So without going quicker, if you just took out the variability, if you designed it in the way you would design a factory floor for building the building, you could build the same building 40% quicker. So normally that's not beneficial because you're never going to build the same building again. But because of the whole platform benefit, you go, now that learning you could immediately deploy on Hospital 2.0 if they use something similar, or a schools program or a prisons program. So the benefit of this is that you can take learnings from one project and instantly deploy it on the next one. And yeah, this is how you start to get into that manufacturing mindset and change of thinking. So I'll stop there. If you're interested, there's loads of links on the website. You can download these slides. There's links to the original books and some of the latest books we've written. Same thing on the Hub website. There's plenty of reading material around this. So I will stop there, and thanks for the opportunity, Jaimie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jaimie. That's fantastic, and showing it in action. And yeah, like that, a building like the Forge, not just huge improvements in terms of productivity now it's done, but all the other benefits that people forget about as well. And then that you have, it's wins lots of awards, not just saying, oh no, this is really well built, really efficient to build, but also it's because of that, and well, partly because of that, it's really efficient in terms of its energy consumption, reducing waste, and so on in there. So loads of, and great to see the guys from Cambridge there validating some of the results and so on from it as well. So I'm sure there's loads of questions on that. We'll come to those in the Q&A session afterwards. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen there, and we'll come to those at the very end. Okay, so we're on to our third presenter. Third presenter is Jack Fitzgerald, who's going to talk about the Lidl Zero buildings in Maynooth that he's involved in there, and showing, I suppose, the drives from Lidl and some of the results as a result of the decisions made in their building of their new store in Maynooth. So over to you, Jack.
Yep, good. No, thanks, Jaimie. Can you see my screen there now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Yes, my name is Jack Fitzgerald. I'm a construction project manager working for Lidl in their head office in Dublin. Been based here for just over 5 years now. And I'm here today to talk to you about one of our most recent sustainability and construction projects. It was a first of its kind project in Lidl Zero Minute. So maybe just to start off with a background to the project before getting into it, I suppose Lidl have always seen themselves as a market leader when it comes to sustainability and construction. So over the last number of years, we've been the first in the market with, before the retailers in terms of our rollouts. So in 2018, we started including electrical vehicle car chargers on site as standard in all of our new stores. Again, in 2019, we started rolling out PV solar panels as standard in stores also. To date, we've over 70 stores out of our over 200 portfolio that have the EV chargers in place. And then we've over 100 stores now with PV solar in place as well. We're actually the largest owner of the rooftop solar in the country at the moment. In 2019, we were also the first store in the country to roll out a BER A1 certified store in Banglestown in County Carlow. And all of our stores since then, standard stores, have been achieving this rating. In 2023, then, we were awarded for efforts in sustainability by the SAI in the large business category. And I suppose that brings us up to today, then, where we've looked at our most recent project in Lidl Zero Minute. So the objective of the project there was to develop the first BREEAM outstanding net zero energy supermarket in Ireland. There's a couple of things in that. So obviously BREEAM being the green building certification and targeting the top tier in it of outstanding, and then net zero energy. That'll be net zero energy by the Irish Green Building Council definition, who obviously we have to partner with in this project. So in order to achieve this, and I'll get to the definition now in a couple more slides. So as not just in construction, but in Lidl as a whole, throughout all the departments in the business, obviously sustainability is always at the front of every decision we make. So as a business, we do have a strategy there in sustainability where it's reducing greenhouse gas emissions as close to zero as possible by 2050 and offsetting any unavoidable emissions to achieve net zero. As a construction department, we saw achieving net zero in our building Minute as our way of taking part in this strategy and trying to aim that target before 2050. There were some key objectives that we wanted to achieve in this project, starting off there with future-proofing. So future-proofing for any incoming EU legislation, such as the Energy Performance Building Directive. We wanted to use Minute as a testbed for this, not just for Lidl Ireland, but Lidl as a group, to take our learnings from that we can bring into our store specifications going forward. As a discount retailer, cost is always at the front of our minds. So we wanted to reduce energy consumption and cost in this store. And again, take the learnings here that we can bring into our standard specifications going forward, if that's changes to building services, refrigeration, etc. So awareness, so we wanted to raise awareness of the project, particularly through the likes of our partners on this, such as the Irish Green Building Council. I suppose make people aware of the project that we're doing here in Minute. And then finally, education. So not just for, I suppose, any construction or sustainability related people, but for the wider public as well. We've wanted to use Minute again as a learning platform for people. They can come to the site. You'll see there's examples of signage on site that'll let you know about embodied carbon, about different, say, wildflower, etc., through the garden area. So we want to use it as something that people can lean into and use as an educational tool also. So starting out the project was probably over 6 years ago now at this stage. There was no definition for net zero construction in Ireland at the time. So obviously we needed to define what the scope of the project would be, and through our partnership with the Irish Green Building Council, they helped us to define this. So there were a number of different, I suppose, definitions for net zero construction through the years, through the World Green Building Council, or even most recently the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standards. But the IGBC provided the most onerous definition, and this was the one that we wanted to target in this case. So this was all operational embodied carbon, so the operation from the day-to-day running of the building, and the embodied carbon through your building materials and methods. And then the offsets only for embodied carbon must be genuine offsets. Here, I suppose some of the definitions through the years have allowed a wide range of offsets, such as the purchase of green electricity. But here, what we actually did in Minute was we retrofitted another store, say in Selbridge, which is nearby, with a portion of PV as well to make up the remainder embodied carbon. So in Minute, all the operational carbon is offset on site to our on-site renewables in the PV. And the vast majority of the embodied carbon is offset on site also. There is a small portion that was left over that, as I said, we actually offset through a PV retrofit within our own brand. So an inset even in this case. Like any project, it's only as good as the team that you can put together in order to achieve it. So like I mentioned there, the IGBC were obviously a key partner in this project, helping us define the scope and what we needed to achieve. And then BRE Group as well, obviously providing us what, I suppose, a scope there as well and what we needed to achieve BREEAM outstanding. through our design team then as well. So we'd onboarded the likes of BDP there as a sustainability consultants, obviously market leaders in the field there, and the likes of our architects, engineers, mechanical and electrical, landscape architects. These are all our framework consultants that we use on a day-to-day basis. Again, the decisions that came from the likes of IGBC and BDP, we needed the team here as well to be able to make these a reality and make the ideas, I suppose, achievable on paper also. And then finally, then we appointed our main contractors, McCallan Group in this case, and an M&E contractor in domain engineering. So maybe just to start off then with the embodied carbon. So we obviously knew that we were performing quite well in terms of embodied carbon from our initial life cycle assessment. So we carried it out based on a Lidl standard store. And I'm just using the UK net zero carbon building standards here, the targets just as the benchmark. Reason being, the Irish targets are predicted to follow quite closely in suit. So what we found was from our standard stores, we were already achieving beyond the 2030 target. We were just over 400 kilograms of CO2 in the standard store. Through, I suppose, material selection and our construction methods in Maynooth, we wanted to further reduce this. We were able to further reduce this by a further 26% and bring us down closer to that 2040 target. In Maynooth, we were achieving just over 300 kilograms of CO2 based on all the changes we made. So the initial life cycle assessment we carried out through our partners BDP, we would have identified some of the key areas that we had for improvement. So straight away, the substructure, your typical, like your concrete slab, even your beams, the columns, like we typically, we would use our standard concrete here that has a portion of GGBS in it, but not much. So in Maynooth, what we would have used is through our supplier Ecosem, we would have specified a product using 50% GGBS, so like materials in the concrete. This obviously has a massive impact on the carbon produced by the concrete in this case, and reduced by over 40%. What we also found then was the roof and the wall panels were something that were obviously a big hitter on our standard stores also. So typically we use an insulated PIR panel, insulated panel. Through this project and our partnership with Kingspan, they were able to provide us a panel from their new lower embodied carbon range, and they actually used Maynooth as a pilot project in order to test this also. So the roof panels and wall panels through the LEC range were able to provide us with an 18% reduction in carbon. We did look at other items also in terms of what we could do maybe with, say, the likes of the wall details, etc., where we typically build in a Porton clay block. In this case, we found that Porton, we did look at other options such as mass concrete or even going with an insulated panel from floor to ceiling. We found that the Porton did have quite low embodied carbon in comparison to these ones also. The only change we would have made here is where we typically specify a 365mm block, we included a 425mm one in Maynooth. Reason being, we want to reduce the heat losses through the building here as well, obviously to reduce the energy then to further heat up the building again. So we looked at all these ones in isolation. Like I said there, we identified some of the biggest hitters, so the roof panel and then all your concrete related items. We did look at the roof structure also, where since 2016, roughly, we've been including glue laminated, glue laminate timber roof structures. We did look here if we could look at the mild steel or even the precast option if there was a way to reduce the carbon here. We found they were already performing quite well with this also. So we again decided to proceed with glue laminate timber here also. So that was the embodied carbon piece squared off. We had a strategy in place. The next thing was putting a strategy together for the operational carbon. So again, similar to the LCA, we managed to determine what the typical energy usage of our standard store is, and we broke this down in some of the key categories. Straight away, we saw refrigeration was the biggest hitter there, making up 55% of the energy consumption. So we needed to be able to target that and see what improvements could be made. We knew just from our own trials over the last couple of years, we typically installed our refrigeration without doors on the chip, without doors on them. So in Maynooth, we decided to include the doors here. What we found was that there was already a 30% reduction just from that piece alone. We also looked at lighting and what we could do here in order to improve it. So we've included additional daylight sensors within the store as well, so that lights will go up and down on lux levels depending on, I suppose, the daylight that the building's achieving at that time. And then also the likes of the heat and the cooling in the building. We looked at different systems we can use here as well in order for our standard system that we typically include in order to reduce this. So like I said there, we've obviously then had to figure out, I suppose, how we were able to achieve true net zero. So through our changes in specification to our heating, our refrigeration, our lighting, etc., ovens, we found we were able to get to a certain point with reducing the store energy usage only. Obviously then the remainder was going to have to come through our on-site renewables. So the solar to store obviously was the biggest one we looked at first of all. But I suppose the issue here was that wasn't enough to get us to true net zero either, because we were limited in the amount of PV we could install throughout the site, be it on the roof or on the canopies. So in Minute, we also decided to include a battery as backup storage here also. So a portion of the solar will go to the battery then and be discharged then as required. And finally, then, this was the first store that we ever had to apply for an export license on. Obviously, in the warm summer months, the sunny summer months, there's going to be an excess of energy produced on the site. In this case, then, we want to export that back to the grid in order to achieve our true net zero. Maybe then just to give you some, I suppose, headline figures there to make it a bit more tangible as well, and what we were able to achieve. So we found that 40 Irish houses was the annual energy saving in Minute as well. And then 142 tonnes of operational carbon were saved. This was the equivalent, this is versus a standard Lidl store, and we found it was the equivalent of 1,500 flights from Ireland to Spain annually. Again, then, so the embodied carbon through our LCA and the change through our first LCA to identify where we were at, and then through the changes in the materials and construction methods, we were able to reduce that by 26%. The energy consumption, again, through the changes in our specification to the HVAC, the refrigeration, the lighting, reduced by 30%. The operational expenditure then reducing by 82%. Obviously, all these new initiatives and changes come with a cost, so there was an initial capital expenditure increase then of 20% also. So BREEAM, we touched on earlier on. Third-party, I suppose, validation and verification of this project was absolutely crucial for its integrity. So the reason we decided to proceed with BREEAM here is obviously they're the market leader in, I suppose, green building certification in the country. So we've used Minute here now as our target being outstanding, so achieving the over 85% based on that tiered basis. We want to achieve the highest we possibly can do. With that, the store selection then for achieving BREEAM outstanding was obviously important. So we have a number of stores and honestly that we are going to either build or retrofit or rebuild every year. So we had to be careful in how we selected this. So Minute itself had the store, it was there over 20 years before it was rebuilt this year. It was in quite bad disrepair, but we used this as an opportunity to reuse and repurpose some of the items, some of the material on site. So I should get a little bit further on. With BREEAM, there are a large amount of credits available in the transportation section. So because of its proximity to Dublin, because of it being based on the commuter belt, the public transport links, we were able to achieve a lot of credits here in Minute that we mightn't have been able with some of the other stores that were on our plan that year. So they were the main drivers of it when choosing the store. The store then, it happened across the 37-week building program with 2 weeks fit out, so 39 weeks total. So the store itself closed, the old store, on the 10th of February and began demolition that day. And we reopened then on the 6th of November this year, in 2025. There were obviously a number of key milestones throughout that project that we were honing in on. So circular economy and the reuse of materials in the initial demolition phase, recycled materials, so the likes of the recycled concrete I spoke about earlier, bringing that into site. The lower carbon materials in as well, so installing the likes of our new LEC range of roof panels, the new the glulam beams. Building services then and the changes we made here, installing new equipment, renewable energy, or PV, or battery, and then biodiversity as well was obviously focused towards the end of the project as we came into the landscaping portion of it, and then all leading up to achieving that net zero at the store opening on the 6th of November. So maybe then just to get into some of the specific items we did on site. So in terms of energy generation, we obviously needed to achieve net zero here through the use of on-site renewables. We typically install 200 kilowatt solar arrays in all of our stores as standard. In Minute, obviously, that wasn't going to be able to cut it in order to achieve net zero. So what we did here was that we were able to install car park canopies in the car park, and then there's also a community garden with 2 further canopies installed also. Again, this only got you to a certain point, so that was where I mentioned we had to get into the battery usage and also exporting to the grid, but it got us a long way there. So what we installed in Minute is 575 kilowatt total. Like I mentioned, 2.5 times the size of a standard store roughly, and over the panels themselves are the size of 13 tennis courts as well, maybe just to give a bit more context. The battery storage then also, this was it's a trial project for ourselves. There's very few, even the Lidl brand as well. So again, it's something we're using as a test bed here for the wider group. So we found that obviously with the months that you're in more production of the energy on site, over 50% of that could be exported. We wanted to reuse some of that energy again also, so battery storage was obviously a suitable solution here. So we installed a 215 kilowatt battery on site, and this allowed us to reduce that export by 13%. So again, putting more back into the store out of what we're actually producing on site. Focusing in on then low carbon materials, so the reuse of concrete and pavers. I mentioned there, we obviously wanted to focus in on circular economy and reusing material from the old building. So we were able to reuse all the concrete and pavers from the old building. We crushed them up and we used them all on site to make up the new fill for the new store. They recycled concrete, so through our partnership there with Ecosem, they provide us with a 50% GGBS concrete solution in order to reduce the overall embodied carbon and reduce the emissions there by up to 48%. The Porto and clay blocks I mentioned earlier, they were a low carbon solution versus other methods we looked at. And again, we just increased the actual density of the block here as well for just to reduce the thermal losses through the building. Circular economy then, we obviously wanted to focus in on this as well at the early stage of construction. We didn't want to be disposing of everything off site. We want to reduce, I suppose, the carbon footprint here also. So from the roof structure, we dismantled it. We kept the timber on site. We actually fabricated into furniture such as insect hotels, garden furniture, the likes of bird boxes there. We donated these to 4 local schools in the area who have all now made their own community gardens using the material. We took the light poles out of the old store. We donated those to new Marina and Buncrana, where they're now installed. And then this local group called the Acre Project, they provide men's shed and women's sheds and community services to the Maynooth area. So in this case, we actually purchased ancillary land in order to install that new community garden with 2 additional canopies also. This meant there was a lot of cut taken out of the project of removal of soil. So rather than just dispose of it off-site or to get rid of it straight away, what we did was we actually donated 7 tons of topsoil to this Acre Project. When you go out to site now, you can see or if you're ever in the Acre Project, you can see they have a number of garden patches that they've used the soil in. They have the likes of even flower patches, etc. So and vegetable patches, sorry, I meant to say. So they've used all that on site also. And then they actually took the old Paladine fence and made new chicken coops just there on, you can see in the bottom right as well, just to keep their chickens safe. Yeah, it's back to the low carbon materials. So I mentioned the glue lamb beams earlier. Again, we do install these as standard, but we continue to do so here in Maynooth. The wall and roof panels where we installed the new LEC range. And then as the project developed, obviously, there was more suppliers and contractors reaching out to us as well with their own products and solutions they could offer. So towards the end of the project, when they got to finishing out the externals, we were offered this product, the 70% reclaimed asphalt pavement for use in the binder layers, the binder and base layers. So that was the final kind of piece of the low carbon items that went into place. The canopies in the trolley bay, similar to our roof structure, they're fabricated using the timber glue lamb, and again, they're quite, I suppose, visually appealing when you walk into the site. It's more something you typically see in the continent rather than Ireland now, but again, it was a key part of the project as well in order to achieve net zero and be able to house all the additional solar PV. And then even just when it came down to the building or the car park fixtures, the bollards, which we typically put around the car park in order to protect the glazing or protect pathways, etc. Through our sister company, Pre-Zero, we installed these recycled plastic bollards on site here also. So funnily enough, they actually all come from the waste or the plastic waste that comes out of Lidl store goes back to Pre-Zero. So again, it might be the Lidl store that we're using these from, previous Lidl store. The impact for customers when they come into site, we obviously wanted to reinforce as well and continue to reinforce the likes of the biodiversity and sustainability image. So we included a living wall on site as well. This was actually linked back to an on-site irrigation system, an on-site rainwater harvested fed irrigation system as well. So even making use of the rainwater on site. The community garden then also, like I mentioned, this was ancillary land we purchased in order to be able to include the new PV canopies in order to achieve net zero. But what we did was we opened up just down the bottom of that photo, there's actually a bus stop. We opened up a pathway, say from there up into the site. We wanted to make something kind of interactive as well for customers when they're coming through the site. So what this is, our biodiversity, our community garden. This includes bird boxes, insect log piles, and there's signage in as well, just to let you know about the different plants and flowers there, about the different animals or different insects you might see on site. And then sustainable mobility hub. So as part of BREEAM, obviously we needed to focus in on transportation and sustainability methods as well in order to achieve credits. So in Maynooth, we have 12 electric vehicle, we have 6 electric vehicle parking spaces for cars, so 3 chargers total. We've 12 then chargers available for your bikes and your e-scooters. We've standard bike parking spaces. We've cargo bike parking spaces for your larger ones. So again, we're trying to cater to all different sustainability methods that may appear on the site. Green car parking spaces then was one as well. We had there was a planning requirement for sustainable drainage here on this site. We have done permeable drainage, we've done permeable tarmac. Previously, we wanted to do something different here, again, just to create that visual impact when you come into the store. So we install these green car parking spaces through a turf stone provided product. What they do is they almost act like individual flower pots within each of those paving bricks that you have the green and obviously grown out of, and it's all filtering down then into the attenuation tank on site. The planter roof boxes then, the rainwater irrigation system. So as well as the living green wall, we did also install these planter boxes along the roof. They're not weeds, if anyone was ever wondering when they're on site in Maynooth. They are deliberately planted there and they're fed through that irrigation system also. And then finally, the timber facade then was one as well. So not something we typically install, but again, wanted to give you that kind of warm feeling when you come into the store car park as well, and further reinforce that low carbon impact as well. So yeah, coming up to the opening then, obviously there's quotes there from the likes of the Irish Green Building Council. So they're a project partner on this. Obviously they want to use it now as a test bed, not just for Lidl and the wider Lidl group as well, but just even for the retail and commercial sector in Ireland when releasing their net zero carbon standards. And again, then we have government ministers that were involved in the project throughout as well, say for visits and then opening the store as well. So it's good to get the recognition there as well, just on a national scale from them also. And then just some photos in the final store opening. So you can see the different, I suppose, sustainable kind of low carbon initiatives we took there, such as the timber facade, the canopies through the car park house, and the PV also, even the blue lamp there inside the store. And then just a couple more photos then just to close it out. Yeah, and then finally awareness. Like I said, it was a big target point for us on this project. We did want to raise awareness through our suppliers, our contractors, through IGBC, and again, further reinforce that piece that Lidl do see themselves as a market leader when it comes to sustainability in retail. And I think we achieved that through this store. And it was a very exciting project to be involved with. It's one we're quite proud of as well now. Since opening as well, we've found that we've been achieving the target set. Our energy consumption is more or less where we thought it needed to be. Just obviously there's a bit of teasing out there maybe in month number 1 where you're getting the new systems talking to each other that we wouldn't typically install. So like your refrigeration, your building management system, the HVAC, just getting everything, I suppose, up and running and getting it performing as it should. But since then, we've been achieving now our consumption, and our PV's been producing now as well in order to achieve the net zero. So all going well in 10 months time now at this stage, we'll have achieved our net zero target there for the year. Yeah, so like I said, it's a project we're all very proud of, and thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, do send them across.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jack. Great to see that project. It's great to see the drive from Lidl to be able to get towards that net zero, but also to include the aspects around biodiversity, accessibility, transport, and so on in there. Okay, I'm just conscious of the time. We'll move over to Q&A function or session at the end. So if anyone has any questions for any of our 3 speakers, please do put them into the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll take those as we go.